Regular meeting of council on Tuesday, September 3rd. We'll start by recognizing that we are holding our meeting on the unceded traditional territories of the Sept and Hoopatisset First Nations. We have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items from councillors? None. And any late items from the city clerk?
Yes, Madam Mayor, there are two late items under E 1.1 from the owner of the Arrowview Hotel, and under H6, correspondence from Eric Lecouve.
Thank you. Okay, would somebody like to move approval of the agenda with the late items? Move to adopt. Is there a seconder? Second, Madam Mayor. Okay, all in favor? Carried. And we have minutes from the special meeting of council held at 12:30 and the regular meeting of council held at 2 p.m. on August 12th. Would somebody like to move adoption?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And that takes us to public input period, which is an opportunity for members of the public to address council on topics of relevance to city council. And we take a maximum of 4 speakers for no more than 3 minutes each. Would anybody like to speak during public input? The time is on to decide if you want to speak.
Yeah, 3 seconds.
We will give more than 3 seconds. Would any members of the public like to come forward to speak? Okay, seeing none. We'll move on to our delegations. We have 2 delegations today, and the first one is from Surfrider Pacific Rim. Come on forward.
We've got our timer as well.
Wonderful. So for delegations, that's great. So for delegations, we give 10 minutes, and then, of course, question time afterward as well.
Yeah, can you put your timer on there? Yeah. Great. Well, thank you for having us today. My name is Lily Woodbury. I'm the chapter manager for Surfrider Pacific Rim, who we're speaking on behalf of.
And Veronica Morales Sanchez. I'm the chapter coordinator of the same chapter.
Please use the mic.
Oh, gotcha.
How's the sound
There
there?
we go. Great.
Is that good? Okay. Perfect. So why Surfrider? What is Surfrider Foundation? Surfrider Foundation is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to the protection and enjoyment of the ocean, beaches, and waves through a powerful activist network. It began in 1984 in California, and since then it has grown to include chapters in Canada, the US, Europe, Japan, Argentina, and some other countries. It's grown in focus as well to a more global focus to topics such as coastal preservation, coastal protection, plastic pollution, and clean water. Here in Canada, we have 3 chapters, all based in BC. There's one in Vancouver, one in our Vancouver Island chapter based in Victoria, and our Pacific Rim chapter, which comprises Tofino and Ucluelet. We're here representing Pacific Rim, and the main focuses of our chapter here on the coast is the elimination of single-use plastics, particularly takeaway plastics that have ready alternatives, the implementation of progressive recycling practices, and to work with community partners to raise awareness and to create the skills necessary for ocean stewardship. And so what we're here to do today is to give you a very brief overview. We have 8 programs and campaigns on the coast, but we're going to talk basically about 3 of them very briefly. The first one is the Straws Suck campaign. The Straws Suck campaign began to bring attention to one of the 10 most commonly found items on the beaches. When we do beach cleanups, this is top 10 all the time. What we did is when we started finding so many of these, we managed to convince businesses in Tofino and Ucluelet to voluntarily phase these out and replace them with other alternatives, whether that be paper, whether that be eliminating them altogether. Usually this also includes an exception for people with disabilities, so that is not a problem. And once there was enough of a buy-in from businesses, we approached our districts. The campaign actually gained a lot of traction. It went viral, had 9 million views worldwide. And since then, other chapters within Surfrider and from other organizations and municipalities have come forward to say we want to do this as well. And we've supported them in that. Following that voluntary elimination of straws at around 80% of our businesses, the districts of Tofino and Ucluelet passed a motion to regulate single-use plastics. And that's when we implemented a ban on plastic bags and plastic straws. And that officially came into effect on World Oceans Day in June 2019. This single-use regulation had both bags and straws as part of it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the Ban the Bag campaign that we did around the same time. So the districts of Tofino and Ucluelet there was a lot of interest in this, but especially the supermarkets were a little concerned about how this would work. So we began by working with the big supermarkets, with the co-op, who were giving out approximately 76,000 bags each in Tofino and Ucluelet at around that time. And so we worked with them, and they started to phase them out. They brought in reusable bags that you could purchase for a fee, brought in paper, started providing boxes. And what we did to support them was we created a group called Stitch and Beach, where we received donated textiles from hotels, from other businesses, from residents in the community, and through sewing circles, began to create reusable bags that the community could have to help them transition to new habits. And once that kind of became a new habit for the community, the bags were eliminated from the co-ops, and the rest of the businesses saw that it wasn't that hard to do. It didn't create much of a hubbub in the community. People transitioned very quickly, and that really helped the districts of Tofino and Ucluelet enact this new bylaw. So that came into effect recently, and it has been a success so far. Businesses have been largely in support. And this is what we bring to you today in part because we would love to see a similar type of ban in Port Alberni, which would include bags and straws, which are two of the major nuisances found on our beaches and also very easy ones to tackle. And Rise Above Plastics is probably our biggest campaign, our biggest program. It encapsulates everything that we do that has to do with plastics. And the overall goal is to reduce the amount of plastic, the impacts of plastics in the marine environment by raising awareness about plastic pollution, by advocating for a reduction of single-use plastics, and for a more effective recycling infrastructure, which is key. The reason that we bring this up is scientists have told us we have 12 years to basically turn things around on climate change, and plastics and climate change are intimately linked. So if we look at every ton of plastic produced, it generates 1.89 tons of greenhouse gases. Due to the amount of plastics that end up in landfills, end up incinerated, or end up in the ocean or in our environment, in Canada, we end up emitting 1.8 million metric tons of greenhouse gases every year just to replace those plastics that we have discarded. So it's a lot of valuable resources that we just throw away, and then we emit more greenhouse gases to replace them. And this is something that I think has really, when we heard about the Green New Deal meeting that happened here in Port Alberni, we started talking to Port Alberni residents, and we realized that there's a lot of support for something like this. A lot of people want to do something, and that's also why we wanted to come here today, to show that there are some frameworks in place that can help, and we also want to provide some support to Port Alberni residents, community groups, and to council if this is something that they decided would be of interest to them.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I'll switch slides.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just building upon that last slide, what we feel is needed in Port Alberni is a public education campaign. One of the reasons we've been so successful on the coast is we have buy-in, we have participation from residents. They are knowledgeable about the issue. They can make decisions that are going to support the movement. And then, of course, they can also be part of educating the visitors that come to the coast. So really, it's a community-owned and operated movement. And so we think the same thing here can happen in Port Alberni with our support, with working with awesome residents who are here today, as well as support from City Council. And the way that this can happen, and has happened for us, is through in-kind support. It can happen through grants and or communications. And again, you can work with residents or the committee who's going to be working on this to come up with communications for your websites, for your events, for ways for talking to residents about the issue. So, looking out bigger picture, what we're trying to do in Tofino and Ucluelet is work to create an ocean-friendly corridor. And what this is to create maximum protection of the coastline. So we received a grant from the Vancouver Foundation to basically scale deeper all of our efforts, from just banning single-use plastic straws and bags to working to eliminate a whole comprehensive list of single-use plastics, as well as to implement practices that are going to get us from a linear economy to a circular economy, as well as working to deepen our relationships with the youth in the schools, with businesses, with industry, and with government so that we can collectively work together to create positive change for our coastlines. We don't have much time left, so I'm going to try and go quickly amongst this. The last part of this is that we also want to scale our efforts out. So once we become an ocean-friendly corridor, we want to use our resources, use our toolkits to also support other communities in becoming ocean-friendly. And of course, we've already started to do this a little bit with the residents here who are interested in starting a committee, and we want to continue to give that mentorship so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We want to keep doing that. And then part of this is that we want to create an ocean-friendly Vancouver Island. So we're working with Tourism Vancouver Island on an ocean-friendly island marketing campaign. And part of this is raising up businesses who have ocean-friendly practices, giving tips for people who are coming here on how to pack in an ocean-friendly way, on how they can give back while they're here, as well as, giving information on cleanup groups and how they can get involved as well. And so we would love Port Alberni to be part of this map, and again, raise up your businesses that are already a part of this movement and give further incentive for people to make positive shifts. We're over time. Do you want us to end there?
If you've got a quick bit left, I'm sure
We have a quick-
that's probably fine.
We have a quick bit left. So I had sent to your staff the Clean BC survey. That's a provincial consultation period that's open now between now and September 30th, and they're basically asking for feedback on the recycling regulation of the Environmental Management Act. And so what we would like to see is have your council write to the provincial government, say that you support a ban on single-use plastics, because ideally we're not going to have a patchwork of policy across the province. We're going to have one overarching regulation. You know, this is happening anyways. There's 26 municipalities across BC and more counting who are doing this. So we want to make this happen in the most efficient and effective way possible, because at the end of the day, it goes beyond bags and straws and all of these other low-hanging fruits. So we would love for you to do that. I've sent the survey to you along with a guideline we wrote that is based on some high-level recommendations, including bans, including expanding the scope of extended producer responsibility. But I'll leave that for you to read. And we just want to see how we can better support you in the movement to eliminate plastics and manage waste, and also to see, basically how we can support you on barriers you may have. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from council? Councillor Haggard?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question and a comment.
Yep.
One of your suggestions is to make producers pay for the cleanup of ocean plastics. May I make a suggestion? That maybe instead of making them pay for cleanup, make them pay for education the public, and do things like if you're a producer or manufacturer of fishing gear, maybe they could set up recycling depots for fishing gear at some of the retail stores that sell fishing gear. And I have to say, fishing gear is something I never thought of that was in our oceans.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a great point. We just finished an 8-day cleanup in the Broken Group Islands, and 70% of what we find in all remote areas is from fishing and aquaculture.
Yeah.
So that's why one of the biggest recommendations that we have is to expand EPR, not so that industry is just paying for cleanup because we can't clean our way out of this problem. As you say, to set up mechanisms so that they're responsible for the whole life cycle of the products that they distribute. And so, like you say, one of the recommendations that we have is having recycling stations available at harbors so that fishermen, people in aquaculture can put in their goods once it's at the end of their life. So thank you. That's a great point.
And a comment, my pet peeve is how much plastic they use to package up toys.
I think I can't remember if it's Toys R Us or Procter & Gamble, but one of the world's largest toy companies has just committed to lowering the amount of packaging on all of their products, which is
Because you
great.
can hardly even get into them. There's so much plastic.
Yes.
So that's a big thing. That's my pet peeve. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson.
Thanks for coming by today. That's great. And I spent a fair amount of time in Qualicum, and Qualicum has gone to no plastics and quality foods down there and stuff. And I understand the philosophy of cleaning up your own backyard, but I'm curious to know how far-reaching Surfrider is worldwide, and in particular, really hitting hard on countries that are monsters. And really, there are 4 river systems that are monster river systems that contribute to the plastic distribution into our oceans, basically in the Orient and around India. And I'm just curious if Surfrider is a worldwide organization and how far-reaching you are.
Yeah, it's a great question. So Surfrider was started in the States, and there's 84 chapters around the United States. There's 3 here in Canada, which are all here on the coast in Tofino, Nuku'aloot, Victoria, and Vancouver. But then we have affiliates in Japan, in Australia, in Europe, and there was one in Brazil as well. They might be folding, but they have been active until of lately. There are no Surfrider groups in China or anywhere in Southeast Asia. However, there are a lot of groups who are working on policy and who are working on cleanups there, who I've personally been involved in. But the way that we approach this, and we've heard, we hear that, yes, there's like a few countries in the world who are contributing to the most to this problem, but a majority of what we find on our coastlines, it's impacting our biodiversity, it's impacting the industries here, impacting the whole ecological integrity of our region is from British Columbia, from our IC and I sectors, from individuals. And so we 100% need more international policy, and we need to be supporting countries that are super dependent on plastics, which again, in my opinion, is a colonial issue. The United States introduced plastics as a product and a packaging, and it's spread worldwide because of its many different reasons. But yeah, that's where Surfrider operates, and we are focused on transforming things on a local, provincial, and federal level, and advocating for the support of international treaties on plastic waste, like the recent amendment made to the Basel Convention on plastic waste and trade.
That's great. Councillor Corbeil?
Just a quick question on alternative products. You talked about paper straws and paper bags, and I'm wondering what else the forest industry could do as far as be an alternative to single-use plastics, for example.
How the forest industry could support?
Where the forest industry that obviously the paper products are made in paper mills.
Yes.
Is there an alternative that could be utilized for single-use plastics?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think at the end of the day, what we want to advocate, we obviously want to advocate away from plastics, but from single use in general. All paper products have an impact, and so what we want to see is that yes, maybe have paper upon request, but always advocate for people using reusable vessels. And I think when businesses are going to support paper and supply paper, that it is forest standard certified, that it is made out of recycled content. So I think having the forest industry be transparent about their practices, that have these certifications in place, can help businesses to navigate those decisions and choose the best paper product possible. But again, at the end of the day, working to avoid as much single use as possible.
Okay. Councillor Solda.
Thanks for the presentation. And most places in the Alberni Valley, like restaurants, which I can speak on behalf too of because of our own, is that we have converted into paper. But the problem is it's triple the price, right? And then what happens is those straws start dissolving in the water. And then you have to get some more because the customer wants some more. And it's just interesting because of the cost, and anything good for you costs more, it seems like. And it's too bad, because eventually I'd like to see everybody convert, but it's
Yeah.
the cost.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate part of our system is that there isn't a cost put on the pollution from these products, right? So
Yes.
it's subsidized by pollution at the end of the day. What we found for most businesses on the coast is that they're providing these paper alternatives might be a bit more expensive, but if they are only providing them upon request, so instead of handing out plastic left, right, and center, and then they're putting a fee on that paper product so they can retrieve part of that cost or all of that cost back. It's kind of the way that we've done it on the coast that's worked really well and could work for businesses here.
And that's happening all over, but even
Yeah.
when you get product in, it comes wrapped in plastic, and you still
Oh,
have
absolutely.
plastic. So
The
plastic
supply
is-
chain is another big one we're working on.
Exactly.
It's huge. That's why we need to start here and at least get this done, and so we can continue to evolve this effort, because it is massive. And this is the low-hanging fruit that really most of Canada is a bit behind on.
Councillor Poon?
I think my comments are similar to Councillor Solda. I have a pub in town, and we've stopped using plastic straws and plastic cups and things like that over 2 years ago. And I think a lot of businesses in town have already adopted these approaches, and many people locally do care about the environment. Do we really need a ban? I think we can police ourselves as a community. And if there is a ban, I don't know how we as a city would enforce it. Can you speak to your experience in seeing other bans at work?
Can we speak to it? Yeah, so the way it's worked on the coast, it's been easy because we built a great foundation. We got businesses to voluntarily come on board, and the reason we wanted the bans in place is that so that we don't have to police this issue forever. You know, we're a volunteer organization. Again, we want to move on to bigger and better things and continue to make an impact. And so what really helped us, again, get that voluntary support from businesses, and then we really worked with both districts in the ban. So we created communication materials for each of the businesses, we offered consultation services for each of the businesses, and through that collaborative effort, it was made much easier for the district. I don't think they've, besides writing the bylaw, which we helped them do, it hasn't been a huge tax on their time or their capacity. If anything, it's been really great for them because they've received so much exposure, not just locally, but across the country, because it all happened right when the federal government announced all of their plans to ban plastics by 2021, along with other mechanisms. And so, yeah, I think what it comes down to is collaboration, but these bans certainly are helpful, again, because you don't want to leave it to volunteer groups and citizens to continue to police it. And again, to have that impact on visitors as well. And in our case, to continue to keep building upon it. Like we have our single-use plastic regulation, and we can keep adding items to that.
Just on that issue, one of the advantages, I think, is, for example, we've spoken to a number of the grocery stores, Walmart, No Frills, and yeah, there's Bilo, and there's another one in there. But all of them had kind of a similar response. They all said, you know, we support the idea of eliminating plastic bags, but we're afraid of what our customers are going to say. And if we saw that in the community there's a lot of political will and public support for it, we would eliminate them. And that's where even just having that discussion, like we went into Fino and Ucluelet, we went through 3 rounds of public consultation before passing the bylaw. And that public consultation period is really useful because you start to see in the community who's got obstacles, how can we address those obstacles, and people start going through that mental process of how do I adjust to this and find solutions. By the end, it was just unanimous support, but at that beginning is where you get those stragglers come on board, and once it's in place, people will police themselves, or you can make it very easy on your bylaw officer by just making it complaint-based. But the bylaws are really helpful in getting whole-scale change happening.
That's Great. Well, I want to thank you guys for your presentation, and really want to just commend you for the work that you have done in Tofino and Ucluelet. I think how you built it there, getting the community buy-in first, you can see from the success that you've had, that how well your approach worked. I opened a business in that area about a year and a half ago, and when we opened our business, the first day somebody came in and said, do you give plastic straws? And we were like, well, should we give plastic straws? We have no idea. And they're like, if you give plastic straws, nobody will come here. And we're like, oh, okay. So that was a year and a half ago, and it was so ingrained in the community already that was what the expectation was. And I'm really proud of the how far I think this community has come over the last year or so as well, because when I go to businesses now, you don't just get a straw with your, we're maybe not as far as Tofino on the issue, certainly, but I see a community momentum building up here as well, and that's really exciting. So I'm thrilled to hear that you guys are interested in helping us in Port Alberni, because I think we have a lot more work to do, and I think you guys have a great model to work from. I think in terms of next steps, we should probably have a conversation with our staff. It sounds like there's the community momentum kind of building as it is, and you guys are in contact with some of the groups in Port Alberni, but I think we should have a conversation with our staff about what it could look like for the city to get involved. We have some, community investment program grants and things like that as well that we may be able to support the initiative with, and processes for that. So we'll have a conversation, then we'll maybe bring the issue back, and maybe we can meet and talk about next steps as well. Okay.
Yeah, once you have your meeting, let's follow up and continue the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate it, and look forward to talking again.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, and our second delegation is Jake Van Kooten, in attendance to speak about bylaw enforcement.
Your Worship, Council members, thank you for allowing me this time to speak. My name is Jake Van Kooten. I would like to speak on the inequality of the enforcement of bylaws, and specifically that of bylaw number 4885, the Solid Waste Collection and Disposal Bylaw, subsection 11.2. as compared to other bylaws, specifically bylaw number 4712, a bylaw to regulate the maintenance of real property, section 7B, C, D, and E, also bylaw number 4975-1 consolidated, the building standards bylaw, and also bylaw number 4843, section 8.3, the removal of signs private property. Now, what do bylaws 4712, 4975, and 4843 have in common? 4712 in effect gives a homeowner a period of time to come into compliance. In other words, a warning. Number 4975 gives the homeowner 14 days to comply or to come into compliance. Number 4843 gives homeowners 14 days to comply. Now, regarding bylaw 4885, imagine to my surprise when I opened my mail from the city to find inside a ticket, a fine for $100 for failure to secure a container. Your Worship, the collection route that I am on is on Monday and starts at 6 o'clock in the summer, 6 a.m. As is custom on this route, the bins are placed at curbside the night before. For whatever reason, not everyone is able to put it out that early in the morning. Some people work shift work. Now, Sunday evening, August 18, under the cover of darkness, a bylaw officer came around and took pictures of the bins and wrote tickets for a total of 75 bins. 75 tickets were written out on a dark Sunday night. at $100 each. That is a total of $7,500. It is an extra $100 of taxes that many are not able to afford. This is where the inequality comes into play. Bylaw 4885 has no warning, even though there are warning tickets available. There is no time given to comply. This is a warning ticket that's available. It says this trash container left out in a manner that allows for bears feeding. Trash container left out in a manner that allows for the feeding of bears. And a little bit over here it says, a friendly reminder from the city of Port Alberni. Friendly reminder, $100 fine. I would like to quote Bylaw Services Manager Flynn Scott from November 21, 2018. I quote, whenever a complaint is filed with Bylaw Services, a letter is sent out to property owners. Bylaw enforcement officers attend, and after 14 days, make sure the property is cleaned up. 14 days to clean up. And another quote from Flynn Scott, and this is from his report to City Council on May 24th, 2019. And I quote, the department has served 6 times as many tickets as last year, and the number of fines issued is also 6 times greater. And then he says, this is a statistic I don't enjoy reporting on. I believe Bylaw Services is customer-based, so voluntary compliance and education is what we strive for. And I repeat that, voluntary compliance and education is what we strive for. The perception is that bylaw officers are cherry-picking the bylaws. There are untold fruit trees with fruit left on the ground. There are many derelict buildings that are ignored. There are numerous nuisance properties with overgrown vegetation and used to store all manner of junk. Yet all these are given warnings and time to comply. That, Your Worship, is a double standard. Had a warning been attached to all the bins, all 75 of us would have been okay with that. The officer at the Bylaw Services that last week told me that this was tough love. This was tough for the citizens, and love to the tune of $7,500 for the city. This past week, I've paid special attention to bins that are stored in people's yards. I see many, many bins unsecured. I see unsecured bins put out Friday and Saturday nights for pickup on Mondays. And in the case of a long weekend, as it was this past weekend, they sit out till Tuesday. Businesses have unsecured bins outside. And the city's own garbage bins are not secured and overflowing. Does bylaw enforcement turn a blind eye to these? And I would like to pass these pictures along to you. I'm sorry I haven't got a PowerPoint, but I will pass these pictures along. And that's the top one is the city's own garbage taken yesterday. Bylaw enforcement needs to be enforced equally and not to a select segment on a dark Sunday night. Your Worship, Port Alberni has had a tough time in the public eye lately. It has been known as the city with a heart. For at least 75 households, the city has lost its heart. And you can restore some of that heart, some of that pride, by ordering that the tickets be made null and void, and instead use them as that quote-unquote education that Flynn Scott so emphatically stated to City Council last May. Thank you, Your Honor, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Are there questions or comments from council? No comments? Okay. Well, thanks for bringing this issue forward. We certainly have heard about it from, many people who are concerned. At this point, bylaw officers are enforcing our bylaws that are there as is their job to do so. But council certainly has the opportunity if we want to review that bylaw or review the process that's being used. So we'll give that further discussion.
Well, I would disagree respectfully, Your Worship, that bylaw officers are not doing their job. They are not doing their job because when you see bins blatantly out in the open, unlocked, over the weekend, and you can't miss them because they're on main thoroughfare. When you see your own city garbage, and then you pick on one route of a city pickup garbage-wise, that is totally unfair and totally, double standard.
I think that's valuable feedback to get, so thanks so much. I would just ask people in the public to not be clapping and cheering. It makes it difficult to do the work of council. We want to hear all of your feedback and certainly take that into consideration, but it's not helpful, and often that leads to booing and other things, which just disrupts the business that we're trying to do. Okay, so if there's no further questions or comments, we'll move on to unfinished business. And the first one from the city clerk is the Arrowview Hotel, 5109 Athol, remedial action.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As council knows, we've been dealing with the issue of the Arrowview Hotel for many years, and we recognize it's an ongoing frustration for council and an ongoing frustration for the public. So just to review, council passed a remedial action order on April 23rd, 2018, ordering complete demolition and removal of the building at 5109 Athol within 30 days. Council subsequently heard from the owner on 2 different occasions, requesting that he be allowed to proceed with his plans to redevelop the property. Council went on to direct staff to proceed with a formal tender process for demolition of the building. On July 22nd, 2019, Council passed a resolution awarding the demolition to Barman Excavating Limited for $435,225. The owner is currently pursuing a sale of the property. There is an active real estate listing. Certainly the best course of action would be for the building to be sold and demolished by a new owner. In order to give the owner one final chance, staff is recommending that council respond by amending the original remedial action order to extend the time by which the demolition work must be completed. The owner was invited to attend today's meeting to update council regarding his plans. He has indicated he's unable to be here today. He did send an email which was received very late this morning and has been distributed to council as a late item. Essentially, his email states that his plans have not changed. He would still like to move forward if council can provide a guaranteed path in writing for potential investors that may wish to come on board. He's requesting a 75-day window to carry out the professional work plan. Although an update could be provided in 30 days, that would clearly show the success or failure of the effort. The remedial action amendment as presented would require the owner to obtain all city permits required to demolish the building within 31 days after notice of the resolution is served, and that the building be demolished and the property cleaned no later than 90 days after notice of the resolution is served.
Thank you. Council, are there any questions? Councillor Solda.
I'm just going to make a quick comment. I'm sure everybody's feeling the same thing. It's been an ongoing issue, and I personally don't want to see the taxpayers on the hook to pay the dollars that are going to be required to take it down. There is no money. We're going to be in, that's quite a bit of money, and I have no problem waiting. I would like to see it down like yesterday, but to get the taxpayers not to pay it, if he's willing to take it down, and no more chances after. This is it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I think it's regrettable that we've come to this, but I think that we owe it to the taxpayer at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I would feel the same. It is frustrating that, we are in a position to be talking about spending $450,000 of taxpayer money, plus, the additional work that we know needs to be done afterward to take down a building that we don't own. We need to hold our community to a higher standard and, make sure going forward that things like this don't happen so that we don't get to this point. I think we all would like to see it come down immediately. Nobody wants to give any more chances, but at the same time, when we're dealing with such a large bill, I think we need to make sure it's a last resort. I think we should receive the late item first, I would imagine. Councillor Soldo, would you like to move receipt of the late item?
Madam Mayor, I move that we receive the late item as presented to us.
Is there a seconder? Okay, and any questions or comments on the late correspondence?
Can I just?
Yep.
The only thing I want to just say about the late correspondence is I'm really disappointed that the gentleman didn't come in person and sent a letter to us. I think it would have been better for him to answer some questions to us, and just wanted to voice that opinion, Madam Mayor.
For sure. CAO?
Madam Mayor, Mr. Letourneau, the owner, wanted to be here, but he's got an illness in the family and couldn't be here because of that.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Okay, so on receipt of the late correspondence, all in favor? Carried. And Councillor Soldo, would you like to continue? And I think we probably should read the entire long motion.
All right, this is like reading a book. Okay, Madam Mayor, I move that whereas the registered owner, whereas the registered owner, the owner of the building located at 5109 Athol Street, Port Alberni, BC, more particularly described as lots 2 and 3, Block 84, District Lot 1, Alberni District Plan, VIP 197D, PIDS 009230718, 009230688. The property is the subject of remedial action ordered by Council on April 23rd, 2018, the April RAO. And whereas the owner requested reconsideration of the April RAO by letter dated May 10th, 2018 and August 13th, 2018, now therefore pursuant to Part 3, Division 12 of the Community Charter, Council of the City of Port Alberni in open meeting assembled resolves as follows. 1, that the April RAO be amended by striking and replacing paragraph 2 with the following. A, that the owner be required to completely demolish the building and remove the property, all demolition debris, and restore the property to safe conditions. B, that the owner be required to apply for and obtain all city permits that are required to demolish the building by no later than 31 days after notice of this resolution is served or provided by registered mail. C, that the owner be required to demolish the building and remove all demolition debris by no later than 90 days after notice of this resolution is served or provided by registered mail. D, that if the owner fails to comply with either paragraph 3 or 4 above in the time required, the city by its employees, contractors, or others may enter into the property without further notice to the owner and perform all requirements specified in this resolution. The cost of performing the work shall immediately become the debt owed by the owner to the city, and such debt, if unpaid by December 31st of the year the invoice was issued, may be recovered by transferring the debt to the property tax account for the property pursuant to Section 258 of the Community Charter.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments on this matter? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And on to item 2 from the Director of Finance. We have investment policy statements and a report with recommended changes. Thank you. Council, are there any questions on the suggested changes or on the report? Okay, maybe the Director of Finance could just give an overview so that the public knows what we're talking about.
Council, Madam Mayor. We wrote the investment policy statement a couple of years ago, so we had some controls over what we were doing and to improve our return on investment. And council had asked that I look at other municipalities' investment policy statements. So I chose 10 of the province that have similar populations to see what they did. Similar populations would have likely the same dollars that we would invest, depending on where they are and what they're doing. So 4 had no policy. They go by what's written in the charter. And 6 had policies, and they compare well with the city of Port Alberni's. The language in some of them, for want of a better word, I did cherry pick language out of their policies and amalgamated where our language could be strengthened, and the suggestions are in my report.
Thank you. Were there any questions on the report or any of the recommendations? Councillor Paulson.
Just a quick question. I know that we compared to other communities and stuff, but do we use our investment company to give us feedback on policy as well? They may have some valuable information that may help the investment industry.
Yes, they had provided me with a template as
Great.
well, so I pulled some information out of there too.
I knew you would.
That's great. I think this is a great overview of what we have, and it's good to know that we can have confidence in that, you know, what we're doing is not completely different than what other communities are doing and that kind of thing. So thanks for doing the review. Councillor Paulson, would you like to read these motions?
I would like to move that the report from the Director of Finance dated August 22nd, 2019 be received.
Is there a seconder? Second, Mayor. Seeing no questions or comments, all in favor? Carried.
And the Council for the City of Port Alberni directs staff to prepare an updated investment policy for Council's consideration, including recommendations as outlined.
Okay, and any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And on to staff reports. Item 1, accounts. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the certification of the Director of Finance dated September 3, 2019 be received, and checks numbering 144353 to 144478 inclusive, and payment of accounts totaling $2,190,017.49 be approved.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Second. Okay. All in favor? Carried. And item 2 from the Director of Finance, the Audit Committee report. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read that motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the minutes of the August 12, 2019 Audit Committee, the responses to questions arising from that meeting dated August 19, 2019, the quarterly analysis of Mayor and Council travel and convention expenses ending June 30th, 2019, the financial statements ending June 30th, 2019, the vendor check register report ending July 31st, 2019, and the investments report ending June 30th, 2019 from Raymond James be received.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Okay. And any questions or comments? Councillor Solda.
The only comment that I wrote down here, Madam Mayor, is regarding number H, which page 54 is McLean Mill Society, because we know there's a lot of changes happening. Yep. The report, or they did not come before the audit committee. So with the next audit, I hope there's going to be something, some kind of document's going to come before us. I just wanted to bring that forward. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think there'll be a lot of questions. It would be very nice to have an understanding of where the finances are at year to date and those kind of things. So absolutely. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And from the Director of Finance, conversion of temporary borrowing bylaw to long-term borrowing bylaw. Director of Finance, would you mind just coming forward and giving an overview of this process so that people can to make sure that it's clear?
Thank you. In 2017, we had done a short-term borrowing for the Silmes Estuary Environmental stewardship protection. That is loosely translated the new sewage lagoon. And we normally apply for temporary borrowing, excuse me, until they have, until the regional district has an intake with the MFA. They do it twice a year. So we do the short-term borrowing, so we're not restricted to the spring and fall intakes to get the funding. We haven't needed to draw down that short-term borrowing until just recently because of our grant funding. And I want to convert it into long-term borrowing for the spring issue with the regional district. And that will sort out our cash flow, so we'll know exactly what the payments are and the proper amortization schedule, so we're not just making interest-only payments.
Great, thank you. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read the motions?
I would move that the report from the Director of Finance dated August 8th, 2019 be received.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Second. And are there questions? Councillor Solda.
So my question is, we're doing a short-term, long-term borrowing. Do we repay that back? I mean, we obviously pay back, but where I'm going with the question is that we've borrowed so much. Aren't we getting close to our cap for borrowing before we'd have to go to referendums and different things?
This is, we have in our liability limit right now, before we go to referendum, we have just shy of about $8 million. This doesn't affect it. It's $8 million after this comes off.
This is already accounted for.
Yeah.
Okay, so $8 million that's it, and then we'd have to go and talk to the public, the community.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much. On receipt of the report, all in favor? Carried. And Councillor Corbeil, could you continue there?
And I further move that the Council approve borrowing from the Municipal Finance Authority of British Columbia as part of the spring 2020 borrowing session. $4,450,000 is authorized through SOMAS Estuary Environmental Stewardship Protection Loan Authorization 2017, bylaw number 4939, and that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District be requested to consent to our borrowing over a 30-year term and include the borrowing in a security issuing bylaw.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, and no further questions. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item 4 from the Director of Finance.
I'm hogging the
Cram it all
agenda
into one
today.
meeting. We have the RCMP year-end financial statement and surplus for March 31st, 2019. And this is a good news story in some ways, and also a challenge in some ways. So I'll let you just give a high-level overview.
Okay, the RCMP financial statements, the funding is based on 34 members, and when the dust finally settled for their 2019 March year-end, their full-time equivalents worked out to about 30, which is why we have such a large surplus. Now, we had funded 2 of the members from the surplus, so we don't get the whole $1 million. There's about $700,000.
Thank you. So this is the refund essentially from the RCMP for positions that were not able to be filled throughout the course of the year.
That's right.
A significant amount.
Yes, it'll help substantially for the $2 million cap council wants us to put on that surplus reserve.
Okay. Are there questions? Councillor Corbeil.
Yes, I have a question. It says there that that the reserve fund be increased to $2 million. In fact, I think what we talked about was the increase could go to a maximum of $2 million. I don't think we agreed on the $2 million figure, if memory serves me correctly. And I don't know if that's just a nuance or not, but to me that sounds like we'll immediately increase the fund to $2 million, where I thought what we debated was that there will be a maximum of $2 million.
I will confer with the clerk.
CAO, do you want to comment on that?
Madam Mayor, everyone's correct. So Councillor Corbeil is correct that the cap on the fund is $2 million, but it doesn't mean that it's an automatic funds will go there. And the Director of Finance is recommending that Council direct that money that way. But it's at Council's discretion what you do with the funds.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I have no problem going $2 million on that. And again, for years, I've always said if there's a murder investigation, we pay. And if we don't have that money, it's going to come out of somewhere. And it'll be tax increase, and I don't want that too.
And I think it's important to note that the money can go into this fund. It doesn't mean that fund is for council to direct. So that doesn't mean that that money sits in that fund until we have a major investigation. If council wants to use it for other initiatives, that's at our discretion to do that. As much as I can very much appreciate having a reserve there in case there's ever a murder or a significant investigation, I think we have a crime problem in this community right now, and we would be well served to use some of that money to invest in initiatives that will improve public safety today rather than waiting for a major investigation to happen. But we can put the money into the account now and determine down the road what we want to do with that money. Councillor Haggard?
You echoed my thoughts exactly.
Perfect.
We do have in our strategic plan for a community safety office, and I think this would be great to use this funding for that purpose. It's significantly more than what we usually get, so to me it's like a bonus, so let's use it for crime prevention strategies.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think that conversation, will happen over time. We're certainly not going to direct that to any specific initiative today. We're not at that point, but I think it's just important for us to recognize where this money came from, because this is money that we're getting back because we couldn't fill all of our positions. That's an ongoing challenge. Every year we don't expend the full amount of positions that we have for our CMP, and yet we have a crime problem in the community, property crime and other types of crime. And so if we can't get the RCMP officers to fill those positions, then we need to be looking at non-policing strategies as well. And this fund is a great way to fund some of those initiatives that we've talked about. So more conversation to come, I would imagine. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the report from the Director of Finance dated August 23rd, 2019 regarding the RCMP year-end financial statement and surplus from March 31st, 2019 be received.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Any further questions or comments? Seeing none. All in favor? Carried. I think the Director of Finance is done. Thank you very much for all that information. Item 5 from the Manager of Planning, we have the development variance permit for 4917 Margaret Street.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So here we have the development variance for 4917 Margaret Street. The applicant is seeking relief from the zoning bylaw as it relates to the front yard setback. They're looking to vary the front yard setback from 7.5 meters to 7.1 meters, a variance of 0.4 meters or 1.3 feet. Essentially what happened is as the property was being redeveloped, an iron pin was used in the northwest corner of the property, and that iron pin was slightly out of place, which resulted in the building being located just slightly too far forward into the front yard setback. So the variance is really just intended to correct that error. Here you can just kind of see how small and delicate it is there, the 0.5 meter offset there of where the posting pin is. So that would just result in a slightly misallocation of the building, essentially. So here you can see the building location certificate, just demonstrating a 7.1 meter front yard setback. So when you think about the properties, they're residential, located, designated as R2, 1 and 2 family residential in the zoning bylaw. As I mentioned, they just recently were redeveloped. Very attractive, nice home, kind of craftsman style home, which is quite nice for the area. Was previously occupied by a mobile home and then sat vacant for a period of time. In terms of land use, the variance will have no significant impact on the use or the surrounding uses. This is just to kind of help you get a sense of where the subject property is, just kind of to the east of Blair Park there. So in conclusion, it's a fairly straightforward variance, a minor variance of 7.5 meters to 7.1 meters for the front yard setback. There's no significant impacts to the use or the adjacent uses, so it's minor. Public notice was given as per legislation, and no comments were received in objection by the planning department. So for those reasons, we're in support of granting the variance.
Thank you. And so I think we read the motion first to receive the report. Councillor Solda, would you like to read that motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that we receive the report from
I
the
think
planning.
this one here. Yeah, so this part.
Oh, sorry, okay. I'll move that the report dated August 26, 2019 from the Manager of Planning regarding the proposed development variance permit number 95 be received, and council proceed with the consideration of the development variance permit at 4917 Margaret Street.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay. All in favor? Carried. And we've had the background information from the Manager of Planning. Is there any correspondence? City Clerk? None? Great. Any late correspondence? Any presentation from the applicant?
No.
Assuming not.
We have nothing.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Questions? Yeah, we're here.
Excellent.
Application. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. And any input from the public on this matter? Seeing none. Any questions from council? Okay. Councillor Poon, would you like to read the last motion there?
Yes, I'll move that development variance permit number 95 to vary the zoning bylaw regulations as it relates to front yard building setbacks at 4917 Margaret Street be authorized by City Council on September 3rd, 2019.
Second, Madam Mayor.
And any further questions or comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. I do have one follow-up question, not specific to this application. We've been getting a lot of development variance permit applications for quite minor issues, like, you know, small setbacks or fences, that kind of thing. And I'm wondering, maybe from the Manager of Planning or the City Clerk, if every community requires these things to come from council or to come through council. It just seems like it may slow down our processes significantly, and it requires a lot of staff time.
Certainly, Madam Mayor, I think it's we can certainly review a delegation of authority to staff for minor variances. It's something that happens, I think, quite a lot in a lot of communities. It still gives people the opportunity to appeal decisions through the council process, but by setting those parameters up front in a bylaw, we can certainly start looking at that.
Okay, nice. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Any comments from council on that? Councillor Haggard?
This might be something that can be also be approved through the Advisory Planning Commission along with the Manager of Planning to approve these small variances.
Well, I don't think they have the would currently have the authority to do that, but I think what I see is yes, yeah. So I think we can look at we can look at our process to see if it is relevant, if it's the best use of time. I've just been noticing we've had a couple for front porches where it was off by a couple of feet. You know, no major obtrusion to the neighborhood or anything like that. So, okay. So moving on, item 6, the permissive tax exemption for 2020 to 2023. We have a report from the Finance Project Coordinator providing information, and then we have path forward on that as well. Welcome. So I know that we have we've had a public presentation on this already when the Permissive Tax Exemption Committee finished their work, but maybe if you want to give an overview of the process we've gone through and the reason for doing it and that kind of thing.
Okay, so first off, I'm just going to start with the preamble from the policy that was adopted by Council in June 2019. So it starts off by permissive tax exemption program is a means for council to support organizations within the community which further council's objectives of enhancing quality of life, economic, social, and cultural, and delivering services economically. The parameters will provide consistent treatment and consideration of all applicants, providing charitable and not-for-profit services for the benefit of the residents of the city of Port Alberni. After careful consideration of all applicants, council may approve a full, partial, or no tax exemption. Okay, so at the beginning, we were tasked with meeting with council. Council had a committee. You adopted a new policy in June. So with that, it came a maximum cap of 1.15% of the 2019 municipal tax requisition. It included reducing the assessed value available for exemption by the percentage of commercial and/or liquor sales generated by the organization. Maximum land available for exemption for a church property was to be 1/2 acre, and residences located on a church property were to be taxed as residential, so if somebody actually lived on the property. So along with those specific items, council actually approved their priorities, which are listed on the screen. So those would be priorities for athletic or recreational programs for facilities or youth, or facilities for youth, sorry. Facilities and services for persons requiring additional supports, mental health, and additional services. Programming for seniors. Protection and maintenance of important community heritage. Arts, cultural, and educational programs or facilities. Emergency or rescue services. Services for the public in a formal partnership with the city, and or preservation to an environmental or ecologically sensitive area designated within the community plan, OCP. So taking all that into consideration, staff was tasked with applying that to all of the applications received. So the staff recommendations are presented in a spreadsheet that will probably be brought up. The estimated value of the exemptions that we are requesting is $231,634.42, which is 1.00044%. Sorry, I had to go to all those decimal points. Leaving available 0.14956% of what your budget was. So if you have any questions on any of the recommendations.
Okay. Thank you very much for the overview. Council, are there questions? Councillor Corbeil.
Yeah, my question is more of the three organizations that were denied, two deal with affordable housing. And surely one of our community objectives is affordable housing. How is it that now the one group that I'm very familiar with, we came to council last September and made a presentation, and the resolution or the motion that was passed was to review the permissive tax exemption with an eye on the issue we had of the day, which was Pioneer Towers and the cottages. And I think since then, they've now, I believe they're involved with BC Housing. I'm no longer on that group. But I guess my question is, how is it that affordable housing, which is obviously got to be a community objective, is not able to access permissive taxes? The only place that those monies can come from will be the people that live in these units who can least afford to pay more.
Staff actually went by council's policy, so the policy doesn't state low-income affordable housing. It's directed to facilities and services for persons requiring additional supports, mental health, and additional services. There's nothing in your policy that gave us the guideline to go with low-income housing.
So one thing that I want to add is when we went through the process on this committee, We talked about the fact that BC Housing is already exempt, if I'm remembering correctly, and they do pay some form of a payment in lieu of taxes, but BC Housing properties are exempt from paying regular property taxes. So that, I think when we went through, and Councillor Haggard and Councillor Poon were on that committee as well, we felt that the service that BC Housing is providing was already exempt, and then other properties that we expected would be exempt and that had been in the past would be exempt under other parts of the policy that we put in. Speaking to just affordable housing, I'm not sure how we would classify that or deem what is affordable housing and what is not affordable housing. CAO, do you want to speak to that at all?
Madam Mayor, not having been involved in this, I'm probably going to defer some of it to the clerk, but the term affordable housing is a bit of a slippery slope. So affordable housing, as I'm aware, is about a percentage of the average household income in a community. So much of the rental accommodations in Port Alberni could qualify as affordable. There are some examples on this list using council's criteria for permissive tax exemptions. There's some examples of applicants who are getting a permissive tax exemption who provide housing, who are partnered with agencies that provide other services on the council's priority list. And I'll ask the clerk maybe to speak to one of those examples.
Madam Mayor, I think it's just important to note when the committee did meet, all of these issues were discussed at the time, and the committee's recommendation, which was ultimately endorsed by council, was to have a focus on programming for youth and also on mental health and addiction services or supports for those who needed additional supports. So when it comes to when it comes to affordable housing, the CEO is correct. I mean, there's lots of examples of organizations that provide housing that do pay full taxes, and I know Diane has certainly reviewed those. There's Abbeyfield, there's
Heritage
Housing,
Place.
there's Heritage Place, and they all pay, they all supply or provide housing, but they also all pay taxes. So it's where do you draw that line? But I certainly know that the committee's focus was on the mental health and addiction services.
Support services. Okay. Are there other questions? I mean, ultimately, this is council's policy. We adopted it. We have the authority to change it as well if we want to. But this is council's list of properties that we are going to exempt based on our policy that we went through a process and created. Councillor Corbeil?
Just one more question. So if the Alberni Valley Senior Citizens Housing Society, and Jerry can nod if he wants, are you now is BC Housing, have you signed an agreement with BC Housing? Yes. So would that mean then maybe it won't be this year, but possibly next year, that there would be an exemption?
I'm not sure that we'd be able to speak to that without knowing what the agreement is, and we don't deem if they are exempt. I think they had a statutory exemption for the BC Housing properties.
Pioneer Towers has a statutory exemption.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The cottages don't. We would still continue to treat them separately. There are two separate parcels of land. We have reviewed the agreement with BC Housing. It specifically states it's for low and moderate housing, moderate incomes. That income actually is $71,000 is what they must be beneath in order to qualify. They currently don't have anybody qualifying. That's just their agreement that we've reviewed. That still does not go with council's policy. So in order for them to qualify, or for anybody else to qualify under that, council's policy would need to change.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Any further questions or comments on this? Okay. Councillor Poon, would you like to read the motions?
Yes. I'll move that the report from the project coordinator, finance, dated September 3rd, 2019, providing information regarding permissive tax exemptions for 2020 to 2023 be received.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And seeing no further questions or comments, all in favor on receipt of the report? Carried. And if you want to continue?
Yes, I'll move that Council for the City of Port Alberni direct staff to prepare the required permissive tax exemption bylaws for introduction at the next regular meeting of Council based on recommendations as presented.
Is there a seconder? Second. Okay. And any further discussion? Councillor Corbeil.
Well, again, I think we have to give some thought into how we deal with affordable housing, and I honestly do not know how BC Housing fits into this. I know that they've got designs on another project in the very near future, and whether or not they would ask for an exemption then, I don't know. Would they statutorily get an exemption? I don't think so. So I'm afraid we maybe are rushing this a little bit. I'd like to think a little bit more about the affordable housing part, as we talked about surely the community. That's one of our biggest issues is housing in this community, and if that's holding back possible projects, we went a long time with very few projects, and now in the last couple of years we've seen a number of BC housing initiatives, and I just want to make sure that we're not holding those back.
I think we want to be cautious here because we have not heard in any way from BC Housing that they're holding back on anything in our community. In fact, we've gotten more approvals than most communities our size, significantly more approvals than most communities our size from BC Housing. So, and the applications that don't fit today are not BC Housing owned projects. So I think that there's some role that they do play with both of the projects for sure, but I don't think that we're not being told that BC Housing is not investing in our community because of this. In fact, BC Housing is heavily investing in our community. I think there's a separate issue of affordable housing and how that is qualified, and if we exempt that in some way, we want to make sure that we also don't end up exempting, half the rental stock in our community, because a lot of people rent to people who are on social assistance, and that is affordable housing quite often. And should we be giving all of them an exemption at the cost of all the other taxpayers? That's a discussion we have to have, but we have to remember that the dollars do come from somewhere, and they come from everyone else. So we have to be cautious with the policy that we put in place. But I don't think that this is an issue with BC Housing because they are heavily investing in the community. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, it's interesting because they could apply next year. This doesn't, we go through this process every year. This is just this year. And the former city planner used to say to me, Cindy, what is affordable? What's affordable in one community doesn't mean it's affordable in this community, et cetera, on that thing. The other thing too is how, if you're absolutely right regarding the renters and that, landlords actually put a little bit of the taxes onto the rent, right? They get their money back. So how do we police that in the long run if we did do that for anybody that rents? How do you police somebody who's, if they're collecting 800 and you give them a tax exemption, are they going to put the rent down to 500? I don't think so. Not everybody is like that. So how do you police it? Thank you.
There's also other, if we're talking about affordable housing as a priority, while the city does have a role in affordable housing, and we have, given land in some situations and supported, we have a DCC exemption bylaw for BC Housing projects and for affordable housing. We have to be cautious to not overstep on what it is our role as a municipal government to fund, because it's a provincial responsibility to create and fund affordable housing, and that's why we have BC Housing. So we want to support that in our community, but we don't necessarily want to take on, bear the full cost at municipal level of funding it. Okay. Seeing no more people wanting to speak on this end of the table. All in favor on progressing to bringing back the bylaw? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, and from the Director of Engineering and Public Works, we have 4,000 Bird Street capital improvements. CAO.
Madam Mayor, the director is not able to be here today, so I can speak to his report. It's well written. I think it speaks for itself. The report requests council's approval to enter into a cost-sharing agreement with District Group for capital upgrades at Bird Street and Anderson Avenue, adjacent to the proposed Portview Landing project. Approval is sought for redirection of existing capital funds to the project, as well as for a new funding allocation from gas taxes for the city's portion. Some background to this is District Group, who has purchased the former EDSS site at 4,000 Bird Street, has entered into an agreement for sale and development of on that lot. The report does tell us how many units. It's significant.
142.
Thank you. The developer is responsible for the off-site servicing. Now, in determining the work that was needed, the city, we became aware that some of our infrastructure was lacking or needed attention. So we've got, as an example, we've got a combined storm and sanitary sewer in part of the area, and those need to be separated into storm and sanitary. And this is a great time to do that work while they are in the ground. And also the current combined storm and sanitary sewer is fairly choked up with roots and things. So it's not on our current work list, but it would be on our work list in the next few years. So this is a good opportunity for us to get that work done by the developer and for them to share the cost with us. But because it wasn't in our work plan, there isn't enough funding allocated. So the director says that he can free up $100,000 from the 2019 capital fund. We have some allocated funds that he can direct there. He needs a further $190,000 approved by council to move on this. You can see the breakdown, if we just scroll up just a little bit, Davina, of the project. Up, yeah, thank you. So on Bird Street, you can see that the owner's responsible for design and engineering, curb and gutter, and sidewalks. And if you've been in that area, you can see that work's already done. They will also do the boulevard landscaping. And the property owner will bear some cost for our infrastructure. They'll bear the 25% cost on the sanitary main, 50% on the new storm main, and 25% on the roadwork and paving. And on the Anderson frontage, similar breakdowns, except the owner will pay 33% of paving. So there's good value in it for the city. Again, it's just come to us only because of that development that's caused us to push this project out front. We've been really clear dealing with the proponent that if council does not want to enter into this agreement, we are not on the hook for any of the costs. They can carry on with what they're doing at their own expense. So council is not fettered by any previous discussions or works. You can make a decision based on your own discussions and deliberations. So just to reiterate, $100,000 is already available to us in the capital budget, but we need $120,000, I believe it is. Is that right, Kathy? I'm sorry, $190,000. And recommending that come from gas tax funds.
Thank you. Are there questions from council? Councillor Solda.
Just to understand, it's going to look amazing when it's finished and everything, and more taxes brought into the city. But the question is, so this will be for future work, like future development, or the development that's going to be happening there?
The city infrastructure that we propose to have installed by the developer would be for use by that development as well as the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
So
and eventually we would have to do all this anyways.
Eventually we would have to do it anyways, yes.
So
and the timing's good to be in the ground. They're in the ground now, so the timing is good that way. We don't have to tear up streets later on, as well as the developer would do the work.
Well, I've always been big on if it's a hole is dug, let's do all the work so we don't have to redo it, and that would be senseless. What a waste of time. What about the electrical and what is it? The telephone? We're going to bury some of this stuff? You know how they've been doing this now?
I'm not aware.
Okay, just curious. Okay, I'm good.
Further questions? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. How much do we have left in our gas tax fund?
I'm
Roughly.
looking at the Director of Finance. Kathy, can you speak to our available resources in gas tax? And if maybe we don't have that information, I'm not sure.
I can give you broad numbers. We try to budget, we want to spend most of the gas tax money that we get in on the capital projects. So most of it is committed, but we haven't done the 2020 budget yet. And we did get a substantial boost in an election year. So the federal government ponied up some more. So we do have definitely some cushion there. We normally, the reserve, I think, has about $1 million in it right now, but it's mostly spoken for. So.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 2 questions. Is it standard practice for the city to partner with the developer for this kind of work?
As I understand it, in some communities that are difficult to develop in or don't aspire to be developed further, they might put all the cost onto the proponent and say, if you want to do that project, you need to pay for our infrastructure. The Director of Engineering and Public Works tells me that this is good value for the city, and he thinks it's fair, this breakdown. So I think it depends on the community.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is the work going to be done by the developer or by the city? Because I remember during budget time, they were pretty committed for the year.
Yes, our crews are busy with, I believe we're still on 6th Avenue construction. This is very time sensitive, and the developer would do all the work.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Solda.
Just one more question. DCCs, are we not using any DCCs, or they've been, I can't remember if they've been exempt?
Great question.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, we've recommended gas taxes, but I'm looking at the Director of Finance again to see if DCCs are available for this.
And how much are we getting?
Okay, the DCC dollar amounts, we had a large subdivision in the last couple of years, so we have, I think, about 150, 200,000 in that one. The other balances, we have storm, water, paving, sewer, parks, I believe. Anyway, there's 6 of them. And each of those funds, say a water DCC, that has to be used for a waterworks on a project. And we certainly, we haven't tapped into it much because there isn't a huge amount of money there, but we certainly can.
Okay. I think, because we're doing storm work, so there's some water there, I think some of it should be coming from our DCCs. That's what the DCCs years ago was put together for. So why not use that, and we can use our gas tax somewhere else too.
And if I can quote the strategic plan, our strategic plan says that we want to develop a strategy for development to pay for development. I think this is a really great example of that. I think there's huge value in this work being done, but this is work to support a development. Development should be paying for it. And I did a quick calculation on what the DCCs for this project will be. And the total amount, if they, do, I know they're building 2 separate buildings, but the total amount will be about around $600,000 for the number of units they're proposing. So we should have a significant contribution into our DCCs. So I would love to see if it's possible for us to fund it through that. I think it should be funded through development rather than on just the average taxpayer.
Okay, make the motion. I'll do whatever you like.
Wonderful. Councillor Poon, you had a
I
comment
agree
as well.
with your comments, and I was wondering, what have we been using DCCs for in the past?
We've been using a little bit. I think there might have been some work on a small subdivision that we may have tapped into it. Not a lot has come out because the balances aren't that significant.
So there's no real issue with using it now, is there?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, not at all. It's just sort of, if it's not a huge balance, it doesn't,
Yeah, and we probably haven't had the scale of some of the developments that we're having now to build that DCC fund up. now that we have a couple larger developments on the horizon, I think this is a great place to start to look to use that fund. Councillor Solda?
Yeah. Madam Mayor, I move that the Director of Engineering and Public Works report dated August 27th, 2019 be received.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor?
Also second that.
Carried.
Oh, I moved it. Okay, and Madam Mayor, I move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni approve the cost sharing of capital upgrades adjacent to 4,000 Bird Avenue, Port View Landing Development with $100,000 from the approved 2019 capital plan and $190,000 from DCC funds.
Is there a seconder? If we are short in DCCs, then we can come back and it could go from gas tax. CAO, do you want to?
Can you add that to the motion now, and then we want to
Okay,
come back?
sure. I'll make that amendment.
And a shortfall coming from DCC, or
That's
from
correct.
gas tax.
Thank you.
If there's a shortfall.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's a friendly amendment. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And from the Director of Finance, you're not done. BC Transit Fare Review. So we've all had an opportunity to read this report. I wonder if we should maybe just highlight the recommendations for the public.
This is the final one.
There you go.
Okay, it's been 5 years since any adjustments have been made to the fares for our transit system. And what I've recommended is option 1 in the BC Transit report, which has the least impact on most of the ticket sales. There was one, the tickets for post-secondary and students and seniors, they were $15.75 and $13.50, and they went up to $18. All of the other fares remain the same. And this keeps it more in line with what's happening in the rest of the province. They do comparable communities, and some of them will be more because it's more expensive to run the buses there. And they're streamlining the different types of tickets too, so they can keep track of people who may take advantage of getting on the exchange and not paying for another ticket. And they're wanting to upgrade the technology so people can pay with their phones.
Great.
Yeah, progress.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Oh, Madam Mayor, I just have a question on that. I know the seniors have not ever got an increase. We know minimum wage went up a little bit and that, but I'm just kind of curious because there's a lot of seniors that do ride the bus that there's no increase in their pensions and stuff like that. So how is it just the way it is? I know gas has gone up and there's all this other stuff. I'm just kind of interested to know where
We get the bulk of the senior student fare revenue from the monthly passes, and those
Okay.
haven't changed.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Councillor Washington, do you want to read this one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the report from the Director of Finance dated August 22, 2019 be received, and the Council for the City of Port Alberni implement the fare structure as detailed in option 1 of the BC Transit Fare Structure Review. Cash fares, adults, cash fares, adult, post-secondary monthly passes, senior student passes, and seminar passes unchanged. Day pass decreased from $4.25 to $4. Sheets of 10 tickets increased to $18 from $15.75 for adult, post-secondary, and from $13 for student seniors.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? And seeing no other comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. On to item 9. From the Chief Administrative Officer, award for contract for McLean Mill Dam project.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
CAO.
We are requesting council's approval of a contract award to the sole bidder, Bowerman Excavating, for a contract price of $267,649. Some background, while we had 4 contractors attend the site viewing, we only did receive 1 bid from Bowerman Excavating, and that bid was $296,749. Given that our budget was at $233,000, we met, our engineers met with Bowerman, modified the project to achieve our needs at a lesser cost. We were able to shave $29,100 off of that for a final contract price of $267,649. If you add that to the $85,800 engineering and environmental costs, it takes us up to a total project cost of $353,449, which means that we're short $120,500. So seeking approval of the award to Bowerman for $267,649 and allocation of $120,500 from contingency to cover the shortfall.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Councillor Solda.
So we have a shortfall at McLean for the dam, right? I just having a really big issue. Like, I understand the dam. The pond, we're not running the mill, so the pond, you know, like we've put money into fixing that. You know, I'm just kind of curious to know what we have spent since the beginning of the year on McLean's Mill in total, because it's way beyond what we allocated, and I just feel like a cash cow when it comes to it. Personally, this is just me talking, and this is how I'm feeling, and then some of the community, I'm sure, has the same thing. I love McLean's Mill. I love going down there when I'm there. I think it's beautiful, but I'm really, really getting frustrated with the whole thing, Madam Mayor, and I'm sure other people are too. And it really worries me how much further we're going to go. And I hope we have this meeting soon regarding McLean's Mill to have a discussion where we're going and what's our future there, because I don't know what else to say. That's it.
I feel as frustrated as you. I think we want to be cautious, though, to separate this as capital. When we're talking about maybe a potential meeting, or actually the direction we gave was a request for proposals for an operator, that's for the operation of the site. This is capital deferred maintenance. This was a project that was talked about being done in early 2014 that was cut from a budget then, and is now coming back. So this is not about anyone operating the site. This is about capital needs for the site. Doesn't make it any less frustrating. I'm with you. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question or so. What would happen if we don't do it?
Good question.
I think there's 3 options here. There's probably lots of them, but there's 3 general options. One is allocate the funds, get the work done, put the dam behind us. Nothing happens after that, except we've spent more money than we intended to. Not do the project and leave the money where it is, or reallocate it, in which case we may or may not receive communication from the provincial dam inspector, and I don't know if we would or would not. And likely this dam project would be back on the budget considerations for next year, and for every year that you're on council until it's resolved one way or the other. It's removed or it's fixed. And then the third option is for you to direct us to do the work we can do with the money that we have. In which case we're going to spend our money, and we're going to get a project completion that we're not happy with, and a dam that doesn't function the way we want it to. And we'll still be talking about the further upgrades later on. So that's, if we don't do it, I guess we're saying put it off to a later day. If you say don't ever do it, or if you say do it next year, there's some variations there. But we may or may not hear from the province about that.
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you explain to me what kind of experience Bowerman Excavating has in dam remediation?
I don't know the particulars about dam remediation. They're highly skilled, and as we know, they're local as well, and they do really good work. So we're really pleased with the work Bowerman does for us on other projects, and we know that they do a lot of different infrastructure projects in the valley and beyond. I don't know their experience on dams.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Paulson, any comment?
I agree with Tim's assessment. this damn project. But we've discussed this ad nauseum, and we're coming down to really the final decision. You know, let's get it done. And I mean, when anytime you're talking about money, it can turn sideways. You can wind up with a divorce. But we've talked about this ad nauseum, and this is the point that we've gotten to, and it's time to get it done and put it behind us.
Councillor Corbeil.
Well, I agree with Councillor Paulson that, in fact, whether or not McLean's Mill runs or doesn't run, that's still a dam that's the provincial government looks after, or at least they inspect it, and we're well aware of the problems. If something was to happen now, I think we would be in some pretty serious trouble. So I think we have to bite the bullet, get it fixed, and as Tim says, put it behind us.
Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I agree we should fix it, and I support the proposed motion.
Councillor Solda.
Just a quick question. How did we come up with the shortfall? Like, how did we get there?
That's a very good question. So we near the end of 2018, in December 2018, Council allocated the full amount, I believe, of our contingency fund from that year toward the dam project. So $200,000 toward that, pending the engineering work. Subsequently, our engineering, contract engineers recommended that the project would cost $233,000. So Council added $33,000 to the 200. And then as the project has evolved, the engineering costs are higher, considerably higher than we were led to believe. And this bid was higher than the engineering firm predicted. And that's the risk you take when you don't really know the cost of a project until you receive tenders. But we've had a number of projects like this lately where our budget that was based on engineers' advice is inadequate for the project when it's been tested in the market. And I think that's a sign of how busy people are as well, how busy contractors are.
So, if you don't mind, Madam Mayor, so if this is allocated by Council, is that it, or are we going to come back, right? Because I will not support anything coming back myself.
If this is allocated for the scope of work that we set out, this is what Bowerman will do that work for. If they get in the ground and find something that nobody expected, then we could incur other costs. That's not anticipated, but it's always, when you dig a hole, you never know what's in there, right?
Especially at McLean Mill.
Yeah.
So I had a hard time supporting this project as it was at the $233,000 budget. And the reason being was I saw the need for the project, certainly, and I agree, on all accounts that this should have been done in 2014 when the other work was done. That said, I still don't completely understand what makes this a priority over other work that needs to be done in the city. I think that we have interim ways that we can manage our dam by shutting down traffic. I was out there last week and there was probably 20 vehicles on the other side of the dam, and they're lightweight, just regular vehicles. But when we have a dam that we know, needs repair work, people should not be driving over the dam just to get 50 feet further ahead. So I see interim ways. I'm not a dam inspector, and I certainly can't say if that would satisfy the dam inspector or not, but I have concerns with the cost of this, and I definitely have concerns with the fact that we only received one bid. I think the CAO's assessment that it's an indicator of how busy contractors are right now is very fair. And I think sometimes when contractors are busy, we don't get the most competitive prices. So if we have a way to hold off on this project and re-tender it down the road, I would like to see us pursue that. I mean, maybe we re-tender it 6 months from now and the price comes down to what we expected the price to be. I don't think we've gotten a fair assessment of what this project is worth with one bid that is $120,000 over what our engineer told us the project was worth. So I have a very hard time moving forward with it as it is. I understand it's an important project to do at some point. But I would like to see us keep the money that we have currently committed, and hold off until we can get tender prices that are acceptable to us. Councillor Kuhn?
I agree in that when we are getting bids, I think we should be aiming for more than one, and it is the market that decides what the price of work is, but one is not representative of the market, so I think we should go back to tender at a later date.
Councillor Corbeil?
If I could ask the CAO, from what I'm seeing, the bid was relatively competitive, but there's other costs involved. There was engineering costs that I suspect, I don't know if that work has been done or not, but that's over and above the tender that you were speaking of, correct?
That's correct. So about 50% of that $120,000 overrun is from the actual construction work, and 50% of it is from the engineering work, which has gone up considerably. Some of that engineering work was developing emergency plans that we were obligated to do by the dam inspector, so that work's already been done. We've already paid out some of that money, yes.
Councillor Haggard?
Something just twigged to me in our discussions many months ago was the dam inspector wanted us to develop a policy for the dam. Is that what you're referring to, the engineer has done?
That's
Engineer
correct,
has
and
completed?
that's been done, and the way we manage the dam has changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, could one of those recommendations be that there's no traffic to across the dam until we get this work done? Then maybe we do that. We just postpone the work for 6 months and put it out for a tender again, see if you can get a better price? Is that a possibility?
It's a possibility. So the ability of the dam to carry traffic load is only one portion, and it's not really the portion that really is of concern to the dam inspector, except that failure of that deck could block a spillway. So there's other breaches through the dam pipes that are decaying and need to be repaired. So those are of higher importance to the dam inspector. If council was to tell us to not proceed with this, I would prefer that council gave us direction to re-tender and a timeline for that. And I think to be fair to the one contractor that did bid, we shouldn't be hunting for better prices, having that contractor's price in hand. So we should repackage the work, basically. So rewrite the scope of work if we're going to retender, to be fair to that bidder. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It's not good business or fair to take a contractor's...
Can you beat this price?
Yeah, basically, hold it up and say, underbid this price, right? Yeah. So we want to be careful about that. Bowerman is a very good contractor, does very good work for us on a number of projects. And I have no doubt they've entered this with good intention as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Councillor Corbeil.
But again, how is that going to alter, there's $77,000 that's been allocated towards engineering design, tender, and construction supervision. That's not going to change, is it?
No.
No, but the original budget that the engineer put in front of us, like, it's not just Bowerman's cost that is above our budget. The original budget that the engineer put in front of us was for the entire project. So it wasn't that they said 233,000 plus our 65,000 engineering. That was the entire project. So to say that, one is competitive, I don't think is representative of, I just, whether Bowerman's cost is competitive or not, I think we are not seeing, I'm not convinced by the market that this is the cost of the project based on one tender or based on one bid. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to postpone the project for 6 months and re-tender the project after the 6 months.
Okay, is there a seconder? CAO, does that motion satisfy what you need for moving forward?
Could you say within 6 months?
Within 6 months, okay.
And that'll give us some latitude around, if we're going to re-tender, we want to be ahead of the construction season for next year.
Yep, that's fine.
And keep the funds allocated.
That's correct. a double dose here.
Okay, any further questions or comments on this one? Councillor Corbeil?
Should we maybe in the meantime manage the dam a little bit better than we have? As you point out, there's traffic going over it. Maybe it's got to be limited to a certain weight or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we will, I think we do possibly have a weight limit on it right now. Let's do this motion and then we'll see if another motion is needed for that. Because I mean, it certainly bothered me seeing traffic that I felt was unnecessary go over it. I know that there are some groups that need to use it for where they don't have other options. But I felt that was unnecessary. Any further comments? Okay.
Need to receive the report too, right?
That's right. Did you receive the report?
Sure, I'll receive the report at the same time. Do you want a separate motion on that?
No. Great. Okay. So on the motion, City Clerk, if you want to just read it out for us.
The motion, Madam Mayor, to receive the report from the CAO dated August 28th, 2019, and that staff be directed to postpone issuance of a tender and retender within 6 months.
Great. Okay. And that's been moved and seconded. All in. Oh. Councillor Washington?
Just a quick question. Does that 6 months, does that put us back into digging season, or is that going to?
The reason I asked for within 6 months because, and I'd have to consult with the engineers, what is the best timing for us to be issuing tenders for a build in 2020? And I just don't want to be, part of our challenge might have been that we're tendering this for the same year construction, and contractors are busy. So, yeah.
For sure. Councillor Paulson?
I'm going to speak against the motion, and one of the things we run the risk of in this motion is that tenders come back and it could be higher. You're better to know the devil that you know than the devil you don't know, and once again, we've talked about this for over a year now, and I'm a little tired of the indecision that's going on, and it's time for us to make a decision. To delay it 6 months, I think it gets us nowhere. So that's my thoughts.
Councillor Solda?
Past council has talked about it for a year. This is also a new council, but just saying all that, I went with 6 months, and the reason I went with 6 months is by the time it gets back to council and it goes through the process, it'll be summer, early spring, and we can do some digging. That's why I actually went with 6 months.
Okay. Councillor Poon?
Thank you. I agree that we run the risk of having bids come back higher, but I think it's very important that we look at more than one bid to make this decision.
Yep. Okay. Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Mr. Bowerman's track record speaks for itself. I don't think he's out to do a bad one to the city, so I trust this one.
Okay. Okay. So on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Boys against girls, and girls win, apparently. Carried. Thank you. Okay. Item G, bylaws, and the first one from the City Clerk, August 12, 2019, public hearing. Are there any questions on this report of the public hearing? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Washington, would you like to read that motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the report of the public hearing held August 12, 2019 regarding bylaws number 4993 and 4994 be received.
Thank you. Second, Madam Mayor. Okay, all in favor? Carried. And item 2, zoning bylaw map amendment number 35 for 4202 and 4238 8th Avenue, Debield, bylaw number 4993, and this is third reading. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that zoning bylaw map amendment number 35, 4202 and 4238 8th Avenue, Debield, bylaw number 4993 be read a third time.
Okay. Is there a seconder? Okay, and any questions or comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And item 3, zoning text amendment number T22, site-specific uses, RM3, high-density multifamily residential, bylaw number 4994. Councillor Paulson.
I'd like to move that zoning text amendment number T22, site-specific uses RM3, high-density multiple family residential, bylaw 4994 be read a third time.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
And any questions or comments on this application? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And item 4 from the Manager of Planning, zoning bylaw map amendment number 33, 3512 Gagne Road, Burrell, bylaw number 4987. Manager of Planning.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So, before you for final reading is zoning amendment for 3512 Gagne Road. So the applicant would like to rezone the property from RR1, rural residential, to R1, single family residential, and no OCP amendment is required. The purpose of this rezoning is to facilitate subdivision that would result in one additional lot being created at the north end of the property, which would be available for development. So here's just an overview here of the proposed subdivision. You can see a smaller lot on the north side there. The existing lot, proposed lot A, where the existing house is. So in terms of the status of the application, we've received first and second reading on April 8th. A public hearing was held on May 13th. The bylaw received third reading on May 27th, and the approving officer issued a preliminary layout review letter detailing the requirements of subdivision on August 22nd, 2019. So all requirements for final adoption have been satisfied. In terms of OCP policy, good just to always reference this. The OCP is supportive of encouraging development within existing areas through infill and redevelopment, and this supports that criteria.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from council? Seeing none? Okay. Councillor Solda, would you like to move motions?
Madam Mayor, I move that the report dated August 26, 2019 from the Manager of Planning be received.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. And if you want to continue.
I'll move that the zoning bylaw map amendment number 33, 3512 Gagne Road, Borella, bylaw number 4987 be now finally adopted, signed by the Mayor and Clerk, sealed with the corporate seal and numbered 4987.
Second, Madam Mayor.
And seeing no questions, comment? Oh,
Nope.
pre-voting. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. And item 5 from the Manager of Planning as well, zoning bylaw map amendment number 31 for 3503 11th Avenue, Satar, bylaw number 4978.
Perfect. So again, looking at final reading for 3503 11th Avenue, where the applicant would like to rezone the property from R2, 1 and 2 family residential, to R3, small lot, single family residential. And again, no OCP amendment is required. So the property currently is made up of 2 residential lots. They're seeking to do a lot line adjustment to remove the encroachment of an existing house onto the lots. That would increase the lot sizes with where the existing home is and create a small vacant residential lot available for development. That's just illustrating the subdivision there. It's proposed. In terms of the status of the application, so first and second reading were received back in November of 2018. Public hearing was held January 14th, 2019, and the bylaw received third reading at the end of January in 2019. Again, the approving officer has issued the preliminary layout review letter detailing the requirements of subdivision on August 22nd, 2019, so all requirements for final adoption have now been satisfied. Similar to the last one, the OCP is supportive of encouraging infill and redevelopment in existing areas of the city, and this satisfies that requirement. And that's that.
Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read these?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the report dated August, am I on the right one here? August 26, 2019, from the manager of planning be received.
Second. Okay, and all in favor? Carried.
And further, that the zoning bylaw map amendment number 31, 3503, 11th Avenue, Satar, bylaw number 4978, be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with a corporate seal, and numbered 4978.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
And any comments, questions? All in favor? Carried. Okay, and item 6 from the manager of planning, Advisory Planning Commission.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Just wait for a second here. So at our August 22nd APC meeting, we received and reviewed an OCP and zoning amendment for 5536 and 5546 Swallow Drive. So the applicant is requesting an OCP and zoning bylaw amendment to change the OCP land use designation from residential to multifamily residential, which would then trigger the requirement of a development permit. So it would be included in the development permit area number 1, multifamily residential. And they're requesting a zoning amendment from R2 1 and 2 family residential to RM1 low density multifamily residential. They would like to consolidate the 2 subject parcels and proceed with the development of 2 triplex residential buildings. So this just helps situate you to where the lots are, kind of on the north west side of the city, right along Swallow Drive. There's where the frontage is, close to the city cemetery there. So currently there's 2 separate legal parcels that are undeveloped. They're located in a relatively new subdivision that's primarily made up of single family and duplex homes. They're designated residential in the OCP and zoned R2 1 and 2 family residential in the zoning bylaw. The proposed development, so the applicant had originally intended to develop 2 duplexes, 1 on each lot, for a total of 4 residential units, and then they revised their original plans, thinking that, you know, the market's changed a little bit. It might be more attainable for folks to buy slightly smaller units and to add additional 2 units in there. So they essentially would like to add 2 units and build 2 triplexes instead of 2 duplexes. In terms of the next slide, you'll see that there's 2 separate buildings that'll be included. They'll be located on each side of the consolidated lot and potentially accessed through the center. The 2 ends will face out onto the street, and we'll make sure that there's kind of a consistent aesthetic with the existing neighborhood there, so it doesn't look out of place through the development permit process. We've already been talking about that with the applicant. So again, this is just a proposed site plan. We'll receive another one through the development permit process, but just kind of gives you a sense of the proposed orientation of the development. In terms of the surrounding neighborhood, so to the north, you can see it's primarily small residential. The Greenwood Cemetery is nearby. The former Gill School site is nearby. And there's some mobile and modular home parks, as well as a commercial lot that's being occupied by Arbutus RV. To the west, it's mostly a mix of single-family and semi-rural style development, and Lugren Creek runs through the low-lying flat land. To the south, it's a mix of semi-rural, single-family residential. Again, same, the creek's there, and there's some agricultural lands further to the south. And then to the east, we have the Hupachessa First Nation Reserve, which is predominantly single-family, and beyond that is primarily single-family as well, and some 1 and 2 family development. Again, that's just giving you a bit of a sense of where the properties are in proximity to the cemetery. Arguably, the surrounding neighborhood is kind of going through a bit of a transition from that rural, semi-rural character to a bit more infill development. Other subdivisions have been introduced, and there's a lot more smaller lots that are in the area now than probably there was before. I think if you look over just slightly further to the west and to the north, at Westport Place, there's some other examples of RM1 zones located right next to R1 and R2 zones. Woodland Manor, Fall Street Apartments are some examples. They prove to be successful and don't seem to have any adverse impacts on the residential feel and character of those neighborhoods. So arguably the low density multifamily housing is a good option for this area, while still providing a bit more additional housing, which is probably in need of the community. This just kind of illustrates that there. You can see where the star is, that's where the properties are, and then just what I've circled up there, you can see some RM1 next to R2 and R1. So definitely some other examples nearby. And it's just some illustrative images. I think that was the Woodland development. I think that was the one of the other ones there. So very similar height and transition in terms of the style of development. So in terms of when we look at the OCP policy for considering new multifamily development and designating lands for multifamily development, there's kind of 3 key criteria. The first is that they should be located within walking distance, approximately 100 meters, of commercial, recreational, public institutional nodes, or community scale parks. So this criteria, I wouldn't say is clearly met by the application, but I wouldn't say that it's a far stretch either. The properties are within walking distance to the and some nearby commercial areas such as Naysgarth Market and the Co-op Gas Bar. A little bit further out than 800 meters, probably looking at 1.5 kilometers away, is the Northport commercial area. So it's not quite walkable, but I think you could argue that it's a fairly bike-friendly area in terms of its topography and overall distance to commercial nodes, and certainly nearby community spaces and recreational spaces. So the next criteria then is that it should be located on or in proximity to major collectors or arterial roads, and that criteria is met by the application for sure. It's near River Road and Beaver Creek Road, which are both main arterials, and it's also well serviced by public transportation, 2 main bus routes that have stops nearby the properties, certainly within walking distance. And finally, the last criteria from the OCP is that there needs to be adequate transition between lower density housing and compatibility with adjacent land. And so I'd argue that this is met as well, because it is a low density multifamily housing. They're not necessarily trying to put in a 4 or 5 story building. It's fairly seamless transition with the adjacent developments. And again, we'll make sure of that through the development permit process. These are just some illustrative images here that help kind of verify that criteria. So here's the 1,000 meter radius around the properties where the star is. You can see just almost shy there of the Northport commercial area. Here, if you look at the 1,500 and 2,000 meter radius, you definitely fall within that category. Here's just showing you the bus routes that I was referring to. So very close to where the properties are. And similar to bike facilities and bike routes. So that's good. Finally, in terms of the OCP, it does state as well for when considering multifamily that you should acknowledge that it's okay for multifamily essentially to exist within single family neighborhoods. They can either be adjacent to or within single family neighborhoods. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're incompatible. So I think that's a fair criteria to point out. In terms of the development permit area, as I kind of mentioned before, the OCP does state that any new multifamily residential lands that get designated by council should as well be required to be in a development permit area. So that's something that we've brought forward, and we've talked about that with the applicant, and they're in support of that. So really that just helps us kind of guide and review the building design, such as massing, siting and form, landscaping, parking, to ensure that high quality development and transition with the adjacent buildings in the neighborhood. In terms of the zoning bylaw, RM1 low density multifamily residential is pretty straightforward. The purpose is to provide for lower density multifamily residential. The 2 consolidated lots would easily meet or exceed all the requirements of the RM1 zone, so that's good. No problems there. Parking and site accesses. The properties are accessed off Swallow Drive, which is a local road, and an alley is located to the rear of the properties. Parking areas haven't been indicated on the current site plan, but I believe the applicant would like to provide attached enclosed garages. And again, this will all be kind of managed and reviewed through the development permit process as well. So making sure that our zoning bylaw requirements around parking are met. Infrastructure and servicing, the sites are adequately serviced. The only thing to note is that BC Hydro has indicated the existing transformers are near capacity, so the additional density will likely trigger the need to do some upgrading. The applicant will be required for that to work with BC Hydro on determining a solution. Otherwise, all other servicing requirements will be reviewed through the development permit process as well. This just kind of shows you where the two properties are and all the service connections are there, so that's good. In conclusion, really looking at this application and considering the transition from kind of single and two family to low density multifamily isn't a huge impact on the neighborhood. All the OCP requirements are predominantly met through the location of the subject properties. I think the development permit process will help ensure that the development doesn't have any sort of adverse aesthetic impacts to the neighborhood. And otherwise, I think it'll be another example of how there can be multifamily and single family in the same neighborhood existing together. So for those reasons, we support the amendments proposed by the applicant.
Thank you very much. Council, are there questions? Councillor Solda.
I know it's gone to the hearing and everything. I still have concerns about the people that would be displaced. Where am I? I probably. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong one. That's why. Okay, never mind. It's been a long day.
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When this first came to the APC, I was concerned that maybe a triplex would not fit into the neighborhood versus a duplex, which was the original idea. But I did do a drive-by of the site and looked at it and looked at the neighborhood, and I think it'll fit in quite nicely.
Wonderful. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read those motions?
Thank you. I move that official community plan amendment number 28, 5536 and 5546 Swallow Drive Power, bylaw 4995 be now introduced and read a first time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Want to continue?
I move that official community plan amendment number 28, 5536 and 5546 Swallow Drive Power, bylaw 4995 be read a second time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried.
I move that official community plan amendment number 28, 5536 and 5546 Swallow Drive Power, bylaw 4995 be advanced to a public hearing on October 15th, 2019 at 6:30 p.m.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And all in favor? Carried. And then the next piece of that is the zoning bylaw amendment number 36, 5536 and 5546 Swallow Drive Power. Bylaw number 4996. Would you like to continue, Councillor Haggard?
I move that zoning bylaw amendment number 36, 5536 and 5546 Swallow Drive Power, bylaw number 4996 be now introduced and read a first time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried.
I move that zoning bylaw amendment number 36, 5536 and 5546 Swallow Drive Power, bylaw number 4996 be read a second time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried.
I move that zoning bylaw amendment number 36, 5536 and 5546 Swallow Drive Power, bylaw number 4996 be advanced to a public hearing on October 15th, 2019 at 6:30 p.m.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, and all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item H, correspondence for action. The first item we have is an email dated August 14th, 2019 from Rebecca Matthews, providing information in regard to electromagnetic radiation pollution. And the recommendation is to receive the email. Councillor Soldo, would you like to move receipt?
Sure. I'll move that the email dated August 14th, 2019, providing information in regard to the electromagnetic magnetic radiation pollution be received.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor? Carried. And item 2 from Rebecca Terapaki, a letter dated August 20th, 2019, expressing concern regarding crime in Port Alberni and requesting council to partner with outside agencies to address the ongoing issues. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read that one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the letter dated August 20th, 2019, from Rebecca Terapaki, expressing concern regarding crime in Port Alberni and requesting council partner with outside agencies to address the ongoing issues be received.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay. And on this one, I would say we are partnering with outside agencies and certainly looking for other opportunities. And I think our policing fund or our police reserve fund will bring up some of those conversations as well. Did you have a comment?
Well, I'd just like to add, this letter that was sent to us, it's becoming very commonplace for people in Port Alberni to have these views. And I think the community policing idea, or the safety office that we were talking about, we really have to start, putting things in place. I've found since coming to City Council that everything seems to take so darn long. And, I want to see it done yesterday, and I know that's not possible, but I just want to emphasize that some of these issues that we're facing, we really have to, we do have the strategic plan, which is a wonderful start, but now we've got to start implementing those things, and the sooner we do that, the better, I think, for the entire community.
Absolutely. Thank you. So we have that moved and seconded. Any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And item 3 from Tourism Vancouver Island, a letter dated August 21st, 2019, inviting council to the 56th Annual Tourism Vancouver Island Conference and AGM taking place October 8th to 10th, 2019 in Nanaimo, and a note early bird registration is $389, extended to September 6th. And hotel and mileage are extra. Council direction required, I believe, on this one. I will start by saying that I think there's a lot of value in, I'm not sure if we've participated in this in the past. Well, in the past few years, I should say. I think there's a lot of value in us sending people to this. One of the pieces of our strategic plan is around MRDT. We know that's been a big topic of conversation, the hotel tax essentially, and we're one of the only communities on Vancouver Island that doesn't use that program, and I think this is somewhere that we can go and gain some insight and see what other communities are doing to increase tourism in their communities. So I would certainly like to attend myself. What is the will of council? Should we send one person, 2 people, no people? Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, just to say that it is a worthwhile conference. I've been to a couple of them, and they've been really enlightening. If council wants to go, like I cannot attend because I'm too busy in October, but I think it should be, if they want to go, then register. I think it's a good opportunity.
Okay, Councillor Boone.
If we have the budget for it, I would like to go too.
Okay. Councillor Paulson, was that a hand up or a glasses move?
That's a glasses move so I can see what I'm doing.
Okay, I'll just make the motion.
Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I move that the letter dated August 21st, 2019 from the Tourism Vancouver Island inviting council to the 56th Annual Tourism Vancouver Island Conference and AGM taking place October 8th, 10th, 2019 in Nanaimo be received, and any councillors that would like to go, please let staff know for registration. Thank you.
Is there a seconder? I will second that. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 4 from Jane McNaughton, garbage fines, an email dated August 27, 2019, expressing concerns regarding the garbage fines. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read that motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the email dated August 27th, 2019 from Jane McNaughton regarding garbage fines be received.
Okay, and any questions or comments? Councillor Solta.
It sort of relates to this letter, and maybe the CAO could address it. There's a lot of people who don't have the chain to lock up their garbage can, you know, the lock. So how can they get that? Because I've seen that. People are going, how can we get it?
CAO.
If people don't have bare locks on their garbage can, they can call City Works and we'll deliver a can with locks on it, or go and retrofit theirs.
Is there a charge?
I don't believe there is.
Super.
There may have been a $10 charge. I'm looking at Councillor Washington, but do you know?
I think it was more
Yeah.
bear-proof one than it was a regular one.
When we first issued them, there was
were
no
free.
cost.
I think CAO just made them all free.
Yeah, I think,
They
I just
were
made them
free because mine were free, and the thing too is, there seems to be more and more bears coming, like in yards and stuff like that, and maybe we need to look at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I can understand the frustration that people who have received fines have, and I think anytime something like this happens, it's a learning experience for the city. We can always improve our process. There's been a lot of concerns around people who feel they should have had warnings first, and in some ways, I think that's a fair feeling. I think we'll learn from this going forward for next time. But currently, I think we have to remember that bears are killed all the time because people are not locking their garbage up correctly. And if the mechanism is there, people need to follow those bylaws that are in place. So, could we have improved our process? Maybe. Maybe we will next time, hopefully. But the bylaw officers are implementing the bylaws that we have in place. And there was a huge bear in my neighborhood last night, just going through looking for people's garbage, and spent a lot of time in one of my neighbors' yards because their garbage was not locked up. So bears like those are bears that end up being killed because people don't lock up their garbage. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm thinking most of the garbage complaints are the ones where the garbage cans are already to the street, and in order for the automatic arm to lift it, you have to take the locks off. So any garbage can on the street is going to be vulnerable to getting looked into. It works in your yard when it's got the clips on, but when you have to put it to the street, you have to take the clips off. So,
yep, for sure. Got to take the clips off. Okay, so on receipt of this first letter, any further comments? All in favor? Carried. And a letter from Maggie O'Neill, an email from Maggie O'Neill dated August 28, 2019, expressing concerns regarding garbage fines. Councillor Solda, would you like to read that one?
Madam Mayor, I move the email dated August 28, 2019 from Maggie O'Neill regarding garbage fines be received.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
And any questions, comments? None? Councillor Corbeil?
Well, there's kind of a theme happening here. And also we had the late correspondence from Mr. Lecouvi also talking about the garbage fines, and then the presentation earlier. And I don't know if we're overstepping our bounds as far as micromanaging the bylaw office, but it seems to me that there's been two fairly major initiatives that really got off on the wrong foot, and instead of getting buy-in from the community, angered a lot of people. And again, I don't want to be a micromanager, but I would like to have a little bit more say on maybe what the priorities are and some of the loopholes or the problems with the bylaw. Trying to implement the graffiti one in the middle of winter was probably not the best timing, and obviously not giving at least adequate notice or warnings or something in this case. So, I don't know what I'm asking for, to be honest, but I think I'd like to be a little bit more informed with what the bylaw office is doing, and given us a sober second thought to say maybe some of the concerns we have.
Yeah, so I think when our last manager of bylaw started, council had a session where we talked about priorities. So I think that's something when we hire another bylaw manager that we certainly could look to have. I think that's a great idea. I know a lot of people wish that they would have gotten warnings before they got tickets. Somebody summed it up very well for me when they said, well, yeah, I speed all the time, but the police should don't give me a warning because I say I always speed and I never get a ticket. So we have bylaws in place, and I think that doesn't mean that we should never give out warnings. I think we should give warnings in some situations, and like I say, I think we could learn from how this was rolled out. But it doesn't make it okay to break the bylaws that are out there. And I think when we have to give our staff some credit that when we are implementing programs like this, it's for a reason, and in this case, because of what's happening with bears in our community. Councillor Solda?
So, Madam Mayor, I just kind of curious, CAO could help me here. In the bylaws, does it state that we're going to fine you if you put out your garbage can? Is it in the bylaws? Because the bylaw officers go off our bylaws, what council has directed. So I'm just curious to know. I can't remember.
Madam Mayor, I haven't read the bylaw for that purpose, but you're correct that our bylaw officers are enforcing our current bylaws.
Mm-hmm. And maybe some of this could be put on our Facebook page to let them know, hey, if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. This is potentially what happens. I know with when garbage comes around, I've had warning stickers on there. Don't put this in there and don't do that. Maybe there's something we can look at. Maybe we could get a copy of that bylaw sent to us and just let us just take a look at it. I would like to see it, re-see it, if we could.
Madam Mayor, I know that the city has done considerable outreach on this issue, and you might recall that last year the conservation officer was saying in local media that the city was no longer a bear smart community, and our response to that was to meet with the conservation officer's service and start to work on a strategy for us to live up to our bear smart designation, and that included our bylaw officers working with conservation officers, doing outreach campaigns. We've communicated, we think, extensively on this, including inserts into utility bills, Facebook presence. The conservation officers have been communicating. Having said all that, a number of people were surprised and angry to receive tickets. I get that. Could we have done things differently? Yes, we could have. Did we do a good job? Yes, we could do a better job. So going forward, we'll certainly learn from this and try and do a better job. And I'll say as well that it's very difficult in this community to implement a bylaw enforcement program in general, because whichever bylaw we strategically enforce, fulfilling council's direction, we're met with people who say, I've always done it this way. Or the next thing is, I'm going to phone somebody I know at City Hall. So that this is a community with old habits, old practices, not used to bylaw enforcement, that as it's implemented in other communities. And that's been a real challenge for our bylaw staff, where they're met with shock really around why is this community so resistant to adhering to bylaws. So it's a learning process for all of us, including our staff.
Okay, and I would agree with you because the community is not used to be having enforcement. We've never had two bylaw officers. That's why we did it for the enforcement, and that's really hard for the public to understand that. And I agree with that. I see where it's coming from. And Bear Smart community, for years we were Bear Smart, and unfortunately we're not there. So we are trying, and it's a good thing. Thank you.
Councillor Haggard.
I was just going to comment that the presenter stated that there's many areas that put out their garbage cans on a Friday night for Monday morning pickup. Why weren't they being fined? They probably will be fined from now on. So a bylaw officer can only do so many in one night. Yeah. So I would say, to people in the community, respect these bylaws.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Okay, seeing no more comments, I think we have receipt of this one moved and seconded, and that's item 5. All in favor? Carried. And we have late item H6, an email from Eric Lecouvi expressing similar concerns regarding the garbage fines. Would somebody like to move receipt?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Is there a seconder? Second, Madam Okay, and any comments? All in favor? Carried. And on to proclamations. Item 1 from Kids Sport, a letter received requesting that the week of September 7th to 13th, 2019 be proclaimed as Kids Sport Week in Port Alberni. Councillor Paulson, would you like to read that?
I'd like to move that the letter from Kids Sport BC requesting that the week of September 7 to 13, 2019 be proclaimed as Kids Sport Week in Port Alberni and be received and the week proclaimed as requested.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, any comments? All in favor? Carried. And item 2 from Port Alberni Fire Department, Fire Prevention Officer, a letter dated August 16th, 2019 from the Port Alberni Fire Department requesting that Council proclaim October 6th through October 12th as Fire Prevention Week in Port Alberni. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I move that the letter dated August 16th, 2019 from the Port Alberni Fire Department Fire Prevention Office requesting that the council proclaim October 6, 2019 through October 12, 2019 as Fire Prevention Week in Port Alberni be received and the week proclaimed as requested.
And no comments, all in favor? Carried. And item 3 from the Recycling Council of British Columbia, an email dated August 21st, 2019, requesting that Council proclaim October 21st, 2019 through October 27th, 2019 as Waste Reduction Week in Port Alberni. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the email dated August 21st, 2019 from the Recycling Council of British Columbia requesting that Council proclaim October 21st, 2019 through October 27th, 2019 as Waste Reduction Week in Port Alberni be received and the week proclaimed as requested.
Any comments? I think this is very fitting after today's presentation on single-use items. Okay, all in favor? Carried. And City Clerk, informational correspondence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A letter from the Green Communities Committee awarding the City of Port Alberni Level 3 recognition on the Climate Action Recognition Program. RCMP Municipal Policing Agreement expenditures to July 31st, 2019. District of Saanich has provided 2 letters, both to the Union of BC Municipalities. One is regarding their resolution on proceeds of crime and the other regarding costs associated with the cleanup of needles and harm reduction paraphernalia.
Thank you. Would somebody like to move receipt of items 1 through 4?
So move, Madam Mayor.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
And any items that councillors would like to highlight or discuss? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. No report from in camera, so on to item L, council reports. We have the council reports in front of us. Are there any items people would like to discuss?
Yep.
Councillor Solda.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I did not get a report in, but I just want to report something about the regional district. There was a motion passed, as we know, there was a development that's wanted cannabis development at Sprout Lake. And I just want to read the motion that was passed, and I think it's important that the city know about it. So the motion is, okay, so it was that the ACRD Board of Directors instructs staff to amend the zoning bylaw to prohibit new cement-based buildings for cannabis production in all zones. And that was moved and carried. And the second motion was that the cannabis discussion regarding abilities to deal with other types of production be referred to a meeting between Alberni Valley and Bamfield Service Committee and Tofino. And that was moved and carried. And that was, that discussion is going to happen tomorrow. And I just thought I would share that information to everyone. We're looking at doing a tour of similar bases. How can you talk about something of this magnitude if you don't know what it's all about? So we have a motion going in. There is a motion already, and it's been passed to take a tour of facilities. Do you want to?
Yeah, so I know Councillor Paulson, at least, at one ADICC went on a tour of Tilray.
Yep.
So Councillor Solda and I felt it would be relevant for, if we're talking about large-scale facilities, to go and visit some large-scale facilities. There's a lot of There's a lot of worry and concern out there, specifically from residents of the area. I've seen a lot of support for the cannabis cultivation industry from other members of the community. And we think it's relevant for people to go and visit and see firsthand what these facilities are like, go to the areas and see if, what the odors are like that people are very concerned about, and just get some firsthand information before final decisions are made that could significantly impact an industry that has a lot of potential for growth in our community. And important to note that Councillor Solda and I get no vote on this, unfortunately.
That's right.
So that was very challenging.
But now it's brought back, some of it's brought back to the Bamfield, and we will probably have
We
to
get a vote on
Yes.
that, but not a vote that holds any weight, because it's just a recommendation vote.
And I just want to add one more thing. Rainbow Gardens has opened up their 12 funded beds, 1 private room and a tub in their in the new wing, and people are already in it. And they're about to open their 20-unit complex apartments at the end of September. And they're looking at a 40-unit apartments for seniors, and it's at the early stages right now. So I just wanted to share that information. It's great news.
And that's the 40 units is the
in the Gully.
In the Gully, and that was approved by BC Housing tentatively last year. So
Yes.
That's got funding attached to it already, which is exciting, along with the Low Energy Housing Society project.
And eventually they'll ask you to come for a tour. So
Yes, wonderful.
thank you.
Other items people have questions on or want to discuss? Councillor Haggard?
I just want to highlight that the Chamber of Commerce is going to be sponsoring a Working Wonders Women in Business Forum on October the 16th. Mayor Minions will be giving the opening keynote. I'll be giving the closing keynote. And Director of Communications will be one of the panelists. So it's going to be a full day of professional development, so I'd like to invite the women in the community to attend. We also have Mandy Farmer, President and CEO of Accent Inns, and Mayor Josie Osmond from Tofino will be giving our afternoon keynote speeches. Thank you.
Wonderful. Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to apologize for no report. Been a little busy winding up the Our Town program for Kiwanis and Parks and Rec and Heritage, and also doing a little thing called Salmon Festival last weekend. So I'll try to do better next time.
And just want to thank you and all the other volunteers for Salmon Fest. I spent a decent amount of time down there this year and really enjoyed it. And I heard a lot of positive comments from community members who appreciated the changes that were made as well. Overall, it seemed like a great event. Okay. Seeing nobody else lifting their hands up, Councillor Poon, would you like to read that motion?
Yes, I'll move that council reports outlining recent meetings and events related to the city's business be received.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. And new business from anyone? Seeing none, moving on. Question period. An opportunity for members of the public and press to ask questions of mayor and council. Yep. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Neil Anderson. Fortunately, you answered some of my questions on the business that didn't require any action on the garbage, but I was more concerned about the bylaw, what's happening with the bylaw department. I'm a little confused, and maybe because I haven't been at some of the meetings. I understand the director or manager was Flynn Scott. If you just, this is from my information, I just want to understand. And I understand that he's also not with us anymore. Am I right or wrong there?
Sorry, what was that last part?
That he's no longer with.
Oh, yeah, so he took another position in another community.
Yeah. How long was he here? Approximately, just on that.
A year, roughly a year.
A year?
About a
Okay.
year.
And who's replaced him, or what's the situation there?
So currently, we have an acting manager, which is one of our bylaw officers, and they are reporting to our city clerk, I believe.
May I ask who that bylaw officer is?
Tim Hotzinger.
Okay. So what are the current staffing levels? Because I know I have a little problem with, we went for so many years, and we still did, with force some bylaws, and I can give you a number of examples, and the people living right next door, and this is, I'm thinking predominantly now of a business, who had the same violations. One place got the tickets and all that. The rest of them were just ignored. It was on who complained, and so we're making an adjustment.
Yeah.
I understand that, and I also understand that that's part of the reason why you've expanded the number of employees. So I wish there was the transition took a little bit longer for people to get accustomed to what they were probably taking advantage of as a result of staffing levels. So what are the current levels now?
So currently we have 2 full-time bylaw officers and 1 support person, and our manager bylaw position is vacant, posted, I believe. So we are filling that position, and generally, I mean, we are moving from a reactive complaint-based system to a proactive system where we're trying to work toward, general compliance with our bylaws, but where we're targeting some areas more specifically.
Yeah. And I wish that had been a consideration when we started handing out tickets all of a sudden, because there's a lot of people who are still violating things, and nothing seems to be happening there. We focused on the garbage cans. Now, Mr. Flynn, I thought, when I understood, came up with recommendations to take a close look at our PR communications with the public. Correct me if I'm wrong, what I hear. And since he left, I guess that's when we started ticketing people for putting the garbage cans out too soon. And the difference in those 2 practices were black and white. Mr. Flynn wanted communication. He wanted to be involved. And the bylaw officers just decided to go out and hand out tickets at $100 each. $100 is a lot of money for a lot of people. And I'm disappointed in that. And I wish the discussion that took place at the end of the correspondence that didn't require action took place when the speakers were here. So there was a little interaction there. But the council had nothing, no questions, no comments or anything. A little disappointed in that. I think that would have been more constructive if there was a little communication between council and the people that were giving the presentation. Anyway, okay, I'm more interested in what the staffing levels are and where we were with the new manager, and it takes time to adjust.
For sure.
And the city hasn't done that with the people. We're still allowed to break a huge number of bylaws, and that's okay at the moment. We're focusing on garbage cans. Mine comes at 8 o'clock. I set an alarm and at an 8 o'clock liver. But if it was sooner than that, maybe we should be collecting garbage a little later. But to get people to understand, someone said 4 o'clock in the morning to go out and put their garbage cans, I don't know. I have a major problem with that. It's a big problem, but it required a lot more consideration and thought than the city has given these people. And I think you should be retracting that $100 fine until we set up a process that makes people aware, and the communication PR is improved, considering our past practice. So thanks very much anyway.
Thank you. Come on forward.
Jim Del Rio, 2871 First Ave. I'm retired now, so I can talk about bylaw because there's no conflict. I think they're doing a great job. It was pointed out to me, I heard a lot of stuff on Facebook. There was a form that went out with tell tax forms. Tim alluded to it. There's been 4 or 5 warnings in the last year. Nobody reads it. So now they end up with a $100 fine. Whose problem is it? It's not your guys' fault. It's not the bylaws' fault. It's the people that don't follow the bylaws. I mean, they're all, I imagine you can come down here and get a copy for yourself. You know, the other thing is this mill pond, because I've been out to the mill and I'm in favor of the mill. What is the pond for? It was to float logs to go into the mill. Well, common sense tells me the mill's never going to run again because WorkSafe BC won't let it run. Why not just drain the pond? Forget about the dam. Put some gravel in there, a few flowers, and a nice little thing like this that says this was the mill pond, and this is what we did. A lot cheaper than, you know, the only guys that use, I think that use that road are the fisheries guys go across, so they might have to start walking for a while. You know, it's only 100 yards. So that was my two things that and Dan, good job. You know, I seen you running around there, and I know you got that our town and everything all at the same time. So I think he deserves a hand.
Yes.
But anyways, that's so like people, like I saw on Facebook all the complaints about it, you know, and I'm lucky because I take my own garbage out. I go to the dump myself. It gives me something to do now that I'm retired, you know. But pay attention, people, and I'm saying this with people who are watching TV. It's your own damn fault. It's not the city's fault. It's not. There was some other group about a year ago that went out and wrote tickets. I don't know how much they were for. They ran out of tickets. I think it was about a year and a half ago, and I was listening to the fellow talk about bylaw. We've had a bylaw guy here for probably 10 years. One. You know, and people are bitching because we had 3. We had 2 plus a manager. Parksville's got 5. Pollockman's got 6 or 7. We didn't even have a half-time secretary at one time. So that poor fellow that was sitting downstairs was having to do all the paperwork, everything else. So now that you guys have increased it and you're trying to get people to do stuff, now you're devils again. You can't win. Don't be refunding any $100 fines. And I don't think they picked on one area. He ran out of tickets, probably. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Come on forward.
Clearly, my point was not taken the way I meant it to be taken. We've been violating our bylaws for years. I'm not saying that's right, but we've been getting away with it for years. Now, all of a sudden, we've done the right thing and increased the number. I support that 100%. We've increased the staffing levels. What we've allowed is as much the city's fault as it is the general public. And I'm saying that because of that, that we deserve to do the right thing, do what Mr. Flynn had suggested, look at the PR, and give some consideration to the fact that we are now changing, that we have to start doing what we didn't do before. You don't just take a hammer and slam it down. So the city has to take responsibility for that as well. I do agree that we should be familiar with the bylaws, but there's a transition period here that has to be acknowledged.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Come on forward.
Take a minute here. Don't get old. I'm not speaking as the director of McLean Mill, but in the 20 years that I've been here, you know, no matter where you are, the topic comes up, and it's always the complaint about the cost and everything else. But then when you ask that same person, well, should we shut it down? No. But we've gone now for, I don't know how many years, of doing the same thing over and over, hoping for a different result, and it hasn't happened. And I'd like to suggest to the council, there's an operation in Alberta, Aspen Crossing, that started about the same time, and is a real success story. And maybe council send a delegation down there of 2 or 3 members or whatever, and find out, you know, what they're doing right. You know, we can't be a carbon copy, but there might be a lot of good ideas there, and we're getting it from a successful source instead of us guessing at what we should be doing. And thank you, Your Worship, and the council members.
Thank you very much. Okay. Would somebody like to move adjournment? So moved. Second? All in favor? Carried.
Pardon? Aspen Crossing. Yeah, you can go on your computer and incidentally, since they start